All right, everyone. I can remember years ago, like when I was in Florida, Rick Scott was already like, he's corrupt. Everyone knew he was corrupt. He's not even necessarily well liked among a lot of Republicans. I think now we see why he's pushing through this gun control, aka unconstitutional impedance on the Second Amendment legislation, to raise the gun buying age in Florida to 21 for certain, I believe, classes of weapons. And much like in Oregon, he's going to get, his state sued by the first individual who's the first very lucky 19 or 20-year-old who is perfectly capable of exercising their Second Amendment rights is going to go to some store and say, hey, I want to buy a gun. No, you can't buy one. Rick Scott says it's not allowed because you're not 21 yet. Let me ask you this. Here's another legal proposition. Let's say that the government were to say, okay, the age for buying a gun is 50. Would that be constitutional? No, and it would also be it would be way out in left field. Nobody would support it. Why then is there any differentiation between the two? The thing is, if a person is an adult, having achieved the age of majority, 18 years of age, they are capable of voting, they can join the military, they can do basically everything. And again, the alcohol argument goes out the window, not a constitutional guarantor. It's different than the other legal protections of the Constitution. Really, the only thing that you get with maybe alcohol and some of these other things that aren't themselves guaranteed to be equal protection under the law. But then you have to show a compelling reason why it would have anything to do with protection. With guns, it's cut and dry. 19-year-old owns a home, bad neighborhood, wants to buy a gun to defend their home. No, says Rick Scott, you can't do that because you're not 21. Unconstitutional, absolutely. So congrats to the next millionaire in Florida who will be the person who wages the very short, cut and dry, extremely simplistic legal case against the state of Florida saying, well, I was deprived of one of my constitutional rights because, the state says I'm not old enough. And because of McDonald versus Chicago, I believe it was, there's already a precedent for the states having to abide by the Second Amendment. Some people, they don't know anything about, I guess, Supreme Court decisions because they don't analyze politics. They don't care about the issue, maybe, or they're just a gun grabber. They don't listen to anything that goes against them. Because they don't understand this, they think that the states can actually do whatever they want. And they're like, oh, well, only the federal government is restrained by the U.S. Constitution. No, that's not the way it works. Again, if a state were to say, well, you don't have free speech in this state, only the federal government is barred from abusing you, we're going to, start fining people for saying fuck or something, it wouldn't work. It'd be unconstitutional. Likewise, a state cannot deprive. If I have the right, in the civilized states in the United States, I can go buy a gun as a 20-year-old or a 19-year-old. In a few states, you can't. Equal protection under the law. It's cut and dry on that end too. You can't do that. You can't tell these people you don't have that right. One of the funniest arguments in favor of the alcohol age, the consumption of alcohol being 21, would be that all the states have it set to that age limit. Of course, then there's a little bit of discretion involved. Nobody cares if you're an Italian family, your kid had a sip of wine, communion wine. Nobody cares. Really, nobody cares if you're like 20 and you drank a Budweiser. Yeah, you may think you get like paranoid and you think, oh, the cops are going to bust down my door now and I'm going to be in prison for the rest of my life. It doesn't quite work that way. You'd be very unlucky indeed for that to happen. But with Rick Scott is just a boring neocon. He's always been a boring neocon. He's a corrupt rhino, basically. And this just shows exactly what I've said for years now about the Republican Party, and even Trump. Trump early on, he starts with a bang, rips apart some gun legislation, says, no, I'm not signing this, ban, I'm not signing that regulation. Really good, like A+, like way beyond any other Republican. Now he's sort of faltering on it. I don't know it might be a part of a legal strategy, really, to really destroy this kind of gun control permanently. That would be nice. Maybe he'll come out and say that that's the case, in which case, bravo to him, a really convincing workaround. But right now it looks like he's sort of, he didn't give up on immigration like maybe Mulvaney was worried he would, but he does seem to have backtracked on guns, which is a big problem. I would say perhaps even more compelling a problem, and lack the ability to defend your own nation. You're saying that a whole class of people who are 19 and 20, they're able-bodied, they probably, a lot of them know how to fire a firearm anyway, they can't actually properly defend themselves. The problem. Rick Scott is exactly what I've said about the Republicans, which is they are not a pro-gun party. For a long time, the Republicans, Kasem says, we're pro-gun, the Democrats are anti-gun. We believe you should defend yourself, they think you should be disarmed. Never been the case, at least not since the Reagan era. No, so before, in the past, it was actually literally a difference. The Republicans are like, oh yeah, people should be able to own the guns, and militia is the people, and they understood, I guess, the legal ramifications of that. The Democrats were the party that end up leading over 100 years, I believe, later to McDonald versus Chicago with one of the Supreme Court decisions of the Jim Crow era, which was actually geared towards preventing black people from owning firearms by construing the Second Amendment as not giving individuals the right to keep and bear arms. Therefore, you could regulate, oh, well, yeah, well, I'm selling you a gun, but I'm not selling him a gun because he's got black skin. And so giving businesses the discretion to do that was a great way to keep the black population disarmed in the Deep South during the Jim Crow era. That's the history of gun control in this country. Literally starts out with a bunch of Democrats attempting to deprive black people of the right to keep and bear arms. Did you know that? Did you even know? Go ahead and look it up. The prior history of gun control, a la the late British period before we become a country, is the British tried to take away a bunch of arms that had been stockpiled by a bunch of citizens to try to defend themselves, and they said, well, you're rebels, so you're not allowed to own firearms. Yeah, big mistake. It sort of leads to a revolution. You think it's about a tea tax. No, the wider fighting did not happen because of a tax on tea. No, it's sort of the civil disobedience. Not necessarily always nonviolent. That certainly begins with taxation and representation in general. But it's firearms that really kick off the shooting. I wonder why. Florida's going to get sued, and the Republican Party for a long time has not been pro-gun. They simply want to maintain the existing disarmament anti-gun legislation. They're the party of no more gun control. The Democrats are the party of, oh, just a little bit more. And then when they get it, the Republicans eventually enshrine it, and the Democrats then find the next bit that they want to work towards. And so it's a slow erosion of the Second Amendment over time that largely, I hate to say, activist courts have been the ones primarily standing in the way of this bullshit. To the point where another reason for the drop in violent crime lately is that there are more guns around because existing gun control legislation was nullified. Really. So, more states, you can concealed carry, you can open carry, you've got stand your ground, you've got castle doctrine, you get all these things. Texas tearing up its anti-bladed weapon disarmament legislation. These are good things. We need to keep going in that direction, not start going in the other direction back towards where we were when the U.S. had sky-high violent crime. You want violent crime, you crack down on free speech and you crack down on guns. Really easy way to increase crime. Rick Scott's a moron, though. He wouldn't know that. By the way, there's a picture of Rick Scott who's tight-lipped, looking off this. If you rotate his mouth 90 degrees, it looks like a little bit like a vagina. Yeah, I'm not surprised. He's a vagina face. What a moron. He doesn't know anything about it. That goofball, he's cast himself, I'm a rock-ribbed Republican from Florida. Of course I know what a shotgun is. No, you don't. You couldn't even fire a gun, probably. What a goofball. Rick Scott, about the least level, the Republican Party needs to kick people like Rick Scott out before it ends up alienating large swaths of its own base. It's like, hey, our party just absorbed several million Union Democrats. It's riding high. What do we need to do? Let's piss off a bunch of small-town Americans who just want to be left alone with their AR-15s, and we're going to start sounding like Democrats on the issue so that they end up voting Libertarian. What a wonderful idea that sounds like. The third-party loyalty is probably going to rise because of this. People are going to look for a party that's actually pro-gun. It's not the Republicans. Hasn't been the Republicans in a long time. Keep in mind, more evidence of another thing that I've said. Trump is not far right. He's not a conservative. He is a Manhattan liberal, but he's a business liberal. He's not a social justice warrior a la California. He's not a liberal in even necessarily the unionist sense. He's a Manhattan socialite liberal. That's what Donald Trump is. No, he's not, I don't think, honestly, I wouldn't think he's anti-gun, but he probably does think some of his proposals are good ideas. They're not. They'll get ripped apart in court. Certainly, the mental illness background checking would get ripped apart the first time someone with mild depression gets a gun taken from them. It'll go bye-bye. It'll never happen again. Age 21, to buy an assault rifle, so-called, or to buy any gun, bye-bye. The courts will throw that out and laugh at it. It's so clearly unlawful. The government cannot convert a right into a privilege. We've got decades and decades of case law discussing these things. We've got, in the wake of McDonald versus Chicago, it's going to be impossible for the government to make any meaningful gun control, aka restrictions, fit anyway. It's gone by the wayside. People decided a decade ago they wanted the crime to go away. They felt unsafe, so they bought more guns. Crime went down. Huzzah! The Democrats should be celebrating, not using the deaths of small children as a reason to push more stupid legislation that won't work. But Rick Scott's right along with them. See, Rick Scott's a coward. So it's easy. The rhinos are cowards. So the Democrats can just morally harangue them and they back down. They'll give a few inches and then plant their feet and say, okay, you can have these few inches. That's all. The Democrats say, very well. And then they take them. A year will go by and they'll morally harangue again. And through that strategy, they hope by successive generations to destroy the Second Amendment. Absolutely. There are Democrats that quite literally have said that's their goal. Maybe a Feinstein or a Rosie O'Donnell. There are liberals who actually do want to abolish it because they think we need to be more like Europe. Now, I think we need to be safe and not constantly harassed and blown up and hit by trucks, but they want that. They want that kind of weird lifestyle. That weird, maybe Brazil or 1984 style dystopia. That's what they want. It's not Democrat. I'm not saying Democrats, I'm saying liberals. And plenty of Republicans fall into that category at this point, including marginally Donald Trump. It's just that he's been choosing issues on which that's the right way to go. Like he abandoned gay marriage as a wedge issue. The Republicans kept losing on it. He forsook it. He's not apparently as war-friendly as a John McCain is. That's really good. Trust me, that's a huge brownie point for him. On guns, though, he needs to side with the conservatives, or he's going to end up fucking the party over. That's about all. Peace out.